Well, hey, Palmetto family, it is so good to be with you. Today, we are continuing a tradition that we began last year where Sean Brown and I sit down for a conversation that hopefully will help you cultivate a little bit of a discussion at home while we're not having in-person gatherings for our midweek classes. So in case you're watching this video and you are a family member of one of our church members, or maybe you're watching this just because you saw it pull up on your YouTube feed and you were intrigued by it. My name is Kyle Holton. I am the student minister here at Palmetto, and I'm joined by our involvement minister, Sean. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing great. How are you feeling? That's the better question, because I know you've had a bit of a funk going on and we're trying to stay medicated and all the things.
Yes, germs are not fun.
No, they're not.
I was threatened by my wife that I could not get sick. For those of you who don't know, I was hospitalized a couple years ago during Thanksgiving.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so she's like, you better not do this again. I was like, I'm not trying to do this.
This isn't my intention.
It's just a chest thing. It'll be fine.
We'll be okay. All right. Well, hopefully we can keep this thing relatively brief so that you can get some rest. I know if you've been here over the past couple weeks, you know that our lead minister Mike has been wrestling with a whole bunch of this congestion and stuff, and maybe you have as well. So we're all kind of walking through this season together. But without getting too bogged down in that, I want to move forward and start to think about next year. And some of y'all are like, whoa, like we're not even in Thanksgiving yet. Like, what do you mean you're talking about next year? The thing is a lot of us have a tendency this time of year to slow down and just coast through the end of the year and say, well, I'll get to my New Year's resolutions. I'll get to whatever's coming next year. But we don't want to do that. We want to go into 2024 with some kind of momentum, some kind of movement, so that 2024 just is the natural progression of what we've already been doing. We don't want to take a break. We want to keep moving forward in what God has called us to do. But this is a Thanksgiving devotional, and while most of our conversations won't surround Thanksgiving in general, we do need to just settle some debates that you and I have been having. If you're one of my students watching this, you've wrestled with these conversations in class already, but I have some very important questions for you as we get started. Two in particular. I want you to think about your Thanksgiving table, all of the food that's there, all the turkey and the pies and the casseroles and everything else. What is one food that has to be on the Thanksgiving table? And what's one food that if you never saw it again on the Thanksgiving table, it would be too soon?
Mashed potatoes, mandatory.
Mandatory mashed potatoes.
Mandatory mashed potatoes,
Okay.
my alliteration there.
Love that.
And get rid of the cranberries.
Okay, the
cranberry
cranberries.
sauce,
Okay.
the can, whatever. Anything cranberry.
Anything cranberry, get rid of it.
I'm okay with losing that. You?
So the one, interestingly enough, that I would be totally getting rid of is turkey. I actually don't like turkey all that much.
Really?
It's dry. And you can put all the gravy and stuff on it. I'm more of a ham guy.
I do like ham.
Give me the spiral ham. Let's do all that. Cause let's be honest, a mid-afternoon ham biscuit after all of the festivities, you're not really ready for dinner, but a nice ham biscuit or something.
Hawaiian roll.
Yes. Now we're getting somewhere.
Have you had the fried turkey though?
Yeah, fried turkey's great. It's just still not my number one. Now, the thing that's got to be there, if it's just a food and we're not talking about desserts, it's got to be sweet potatoes. And this is the debate that you and I have, is whether or not mashed potatoes or sweet potatoes are the superior of the potato family. Now, Rachel can't have sweet potatoes. She's allergic to them. Now, I eat enough for the two of us and then some. But no, I don't hate on the mashed potatoes. I think they're great.
See, I just too sweet for me. The way that I've had them, too sweet.
Now, see,
I love buttery goodness, and so my mashed potatoes have butter, and then I put more butter on them.
You feel like sticks of butter on top.
Yes.
Good grief.
The joke in my family is you can never have too much butter. And I think I was the one that said it. So
you're like, I started the joke. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So this has been this active debate that we've had going in our classes on Sunday morning. And yesterday I asked, like, what's one food like that you've got to have? It's got to be there for Thanksgiving. And Joshua was like, I have 5. And I'm like, I said 1. Like, where did 5 come from? And cranberry sauce was actually one of them. He loves it. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought your dad hated this stuff.
I do. So but granddad likes it.
This is amazing. This is so good. Let's actually get into the meat of our conversation so that our family members don't have to sit and listen to us for the next 3 hours, as we probably could keep on
Definitely
talking.
Could.
But like I said a moment ago, we want to be thinking pretty deeply about the coming year already, because what you and I both know is that if you don't do some preparation ahead of time, then whatever goals, whatever ideas you have for the future, they're just frankly not going to happen. So we've talked a lot about in our conversations about this idea of a rule of life. Now, Mike mentioned this a couple of weeks ago in a sermon, so hopefully this isn't the first time that you, our listeners and viewers, are hearing that concept. But just to give you a basic understanding of what we're talking about here, a rule of life is a set of rhythms and practices and a schedule that helps you embody a life with God. So these are spiritual disciplines. These are routines that you would come back to regularly. And the whole idea is that you want a support system so that your life with God can thrive, or in Jesus's language in John 15, it'll bear fruit. So your rule of life is unique to you and your life circumstance and your income level and your family situation, but it gives this opportunity for your life to thrive and bear fruit in God. So what we're going to do in a moment is we're going to actually show you a sample rule of life from a church out in Portland, Oregon. And they've listed off what I believe are 9 of these spiritual practices and the identity that comes from each one of those. We want to be this kind of people by practicing this particular idea. So we're going to show this on the screen here in just a moment. But Sean, you and I both have this in front of us. So just to give our listeners and viewers an idea, when you look at this rule of life, this sample list of practices and habits, is there one or two that seem to come more naturally for you, like they fit your personality, or they're ones that have been particularly helpful for you in your recent spiritual life?
Yeah, for me, one of the ones they talk about is a community of contentment and a culture of consumerism through the practice of generosity.
Okay.
And again, these are all going to be up on the screen. But just throughout my life, that's kind of been who I was. We were joking the other day about I would just go to the store to get shoes, and I'd really look at like what's the cheapest ones, and I'd be like those. And you hadn't tried them on yet. Yeah, that's what I want. Yeah. And being able to give money, just not wild and crazy, but that's just been something that's for me has been pretty simple.
Right on.
Generosity, and that would be the one that really sticks out for me. For you?
Okay. At least lately, this practice of Sabbath has been one that has really blessed our family. A few months ago, we tried to begin implementing a weekly Sabbath, which if any of you are unfamiliar, we've done some teachings on in the past. You can just go search our YouTube channel to find it. But the idea is it's a 24-hour period of time where you set aside and you don't work. You don't worry about work. You're purely spending time cultivating your relationship with God and your relationship with those who are most important to you. And the line that you'll see on the screen is that Bridgetown seeks to be a community of rest in a culture of hurry. And I'm actually going back and rereading a book about hurry that I actually see on Mike's shelf behind you called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. If you don't read anything else next year, make sure you read that book. But what I found is that we didn't practice Sabbath for about 6 weeks or so for a variety of reasons. Emmy was in the hospital, we were traveling, whatever, and I could feel it in my body that we had not rested well. I was starting to feel more anxious. I was starting to feel more frustrated at things in life. But as soon as we brought Sabbath back into the picture and slowed our life down, it was amazing at how much that brought my awareness of what God had been doing into view. So Sabbath is the one that sticks out the most to me. Now, let's flip it on its head. Is there one that is the most challenging for you?
See, Sabbath is my most challenging.
Okay.
That rest is very difficult for me.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, I coach volleyball, local high school, and we just ended our season. And so now I'm coming home at a normal time, and it freaks me out. I don't have anything to do, and I don't, that stillness is very hard for me. And I know there's more to it. You and I've talked about, there's more to it, but that rest, I feel like I should be doing something. And I'm learning by discussions we've had and just more that I'm studying into it and trying to move that in. But on this list that we have in front of us, Sabbath really is hard for me.
Right. When I look at it, I'm seeing practices that have been a part of my life in the past. And if I think about things that are most challenging, I'm looking at the ones that maybe I used to do that I don't do nearly as much. And one of those is fasting. Now, I do the whole intermittent fasting thing, but I'm convinced that when you're fasting for spiritual purposes, it doesn't need to be for physical purposes. Those need to be separate and apart. But I used to fast like a full day leading into Sabbath, which meant like our Sabbath meal was extra special. We had tacos on Fridays. It was incredible. But I'll tell you what, about 2 or 3 p.m., when I hadn't eaten and everybody else, I've been feeding the kids and all this stuff, like it was rough. And I'm wondering potentially like maybe that was part of the reason why I stopped, is because it was difficult. And I remember Rachel actually telling me, she was like, I don't like it when you fast. Like you're like, there's hangry and then there's like Kyle when he's fasting. And
there's
I'm like,
hangry, fasting hanger.
Oh, come on.
There you go.
But it was one of those, and I think actually you were the one that said it, like, maybe that's the Lord bringing some things to surface that otherwise would not have been noticed. And that really resonated with me, that like this practice of fasting, as difficult as it is, was doing something deep inside of me that actually was painful but needed to be done. So of course now I'm convicted and feel like I need to go fast again. But after Thanksgiving, not any time between now and then.
After the sweet potatoes.
We are not trying to tell you to go fast on Thursday. That would be cruel and unusual punishment in so many ways. So here's what we'd like to do. Over the next few minutes, we want to introduce to you, or maybe reintroduce, a couple of these practices and just walk through some things and offer you some times of discussion. But here's what we'd like to do first. We're going to put the entire list of this rule of life back on the screen here in just a moment. And we want to give you some space. You can just pause this video. You don't have to like let it run or anything like that. And just have a conversation with the people around you, answering a couple of questions. Here they are. First, which of the practices that you see come the most naturally for you? Now, I want you to think for you, then for your family or the people who you spend time with on a regular basis, and then extend it out and begin to think about your life group, or if you're not a part of a life group, your spiritual community, the people who you spend the most time with when it comes to your faith journey together. And just wrestle with, talk about which of these practices are the most meaningful for you, which ones come the most natural, and then do exactly what Sean and I just did. Which ones are actually the most challenging? Now, we don't want to say the most difficult, because a lot of that has to do with personality and everything else, but which one's the most challenging for you to implement into your life? So take a couple of minutes, pause the video. We're going to put the full list back up on the screen and have a conversation with those you're with.
Welcome back. Hope that was some good discussion for y'all. We want to take some time and focus on 2 specific practices that our congregation is specifically going to be focusing on this upcoming year. One is prayer, and the other one is hospitality, with the focus of hospitality leading to evangelism. Not just being nice to people, but hoping to use that as an opportunity to lead others to Christ. And so we're going to talk about prayer first. And what is prayer? And real simple definition is to commune and to communicate with God. And you had some ideas about this where there's kind of something that you've recently come across that I really liked.
Yeah, so it reminded me of when our staff went through the prayer practice. And if you're unfamiliar, there's an organization called Practicing the Way, and their whole goal is to create resources for spiritual formation for churches. So they create these practices that are centered around a particular spiritual discipline. So our staff went through the one on prayer, and it was a 4-week kind of guided time together that really was a blessing. So I encourage you to go check it out. But in it, there was this progression, if you will, or several stages or aspects of prayer. And these stages are talking to God, talking with God, listening to God, and being with God. Now, it's important to note that this isn't like a stair step, like you move from one to the other, but instead these are aspects of a life of prayer with God. So there are times when you are just talking to God. And there's a distinction between talking to and talking with. But if prayer is a conversation, if it's a communication tool with God, then there's a listening component. And then eventually there's just this, it's kind of like when you're with your spouse and you have been with them for an extended period of time, and like you can just be sitting in the same room as each other and you don't have to say anything. And yet it's like, that's purely enough. And that's the kind of goal that we're looking for as followers of Jesus, is this just union with God, of being with God as this, the deepest parts of ourselves calling out to the deepest parts of God. And most of us tend to focus on the first two, just talking to God, talking with God. But then we struggle with the others, but you have to definitely start somewhere. So prayer is this beautiful opportunity to draw ourselves closer to the Father, closer to God. I love the definition that you shared, where it's prayer is communing and communicating with God. And it's involving a life in the Spirit. You know, most of us at some point, like, prayer just started as a maybe first thing when you wake up, or last thing before bed, or maybe around a meal time or something. And those are great places to begin. But prayer is something that, you know, you talk about, we're looking forward to this being implemented in our church in the coming year. We're thinking about how can we implement a lifestyle of prayer in our worship gatherings, in our life groups. How can we do extended teachings on prayer, podcast episodes on prayer? We want to encourage people to be the kinds of people who pray regularly. We want to be known as like, man, that's a church who prays. That's a church that believes in the power of prayer. Because if we see Jesus embodying something, he regularly pulls away from the crowds to go be with God and to pray, then we want to do the exact same thing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this conversation to you in a very similar way. We're going to ask you a couple of different questions to wrestle with. And then when we come back, we want to give you just a couple of really tangible, practical tips on how you can grow in your prayer life in the next 30 days. Like before the end of the year, you can lay a foundation of prayer for the coming year. So here's your question. Very simple and very connected to the first series of questions. Where do you currently see prayer incorporated into your personal life? And then extend it out a little bit further. Where do you currently see prayer incorporated into your family's life? Is this something that you're doing with your family? And we don't just mean your nuclear family, you know, mom, dad, and 2 kids in a white picket fence. But then extend it out even further. And how do you see prayer being incorporated into your life group, or your spiritual communities? Talk about how that's been a blessing for you, or maybe how you could continue to grow in that in the coming weeks. So take a couple minutes. We'll put the questions back up on the screen, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Welcome back. Hope that had some good discussion for you. One of the things that we want to do for you, though, is give you some practical tips on how maybe to do this. As Kyle said, you know, as we get towards the holidays, we kind of slow down. Yeah. I had a coach when I was in real estate. He would make the analogy. It's like getting off the interstate. You got the speed going, And then you get to the holidays and you hit the exit ramp and you got to slow down and then you got to speed up. And so I told him every time I go on a trip, I think of you and I think of that. And he's like, well, did it change your business? And I was like, I don't know, but
we'll see.
So we want to give you some practical tips so that you don't slow down, don't lose this momentum. Yeah. This first one, I think, is going to be hard for some difficult. We won't use hard. Difficult, challenging, different. We want you to spend time with the Lord before you unlock your phone. So when you first wake up in the morning, spend time with the Lord, thanking Him, asking for guidance, letting Him dictate your day instead of allowing what your phone might tell you is going to dictate your day.
Our phones get us really reactionary. If
they
we're
do.
Honest. Like if you check your email first thing in the morning, you're already just worried about whatever's coming. And like, I think we need to be clear. Like, we're not asking you to spend an hour in prayer before you have your morning coffee. Like, even just an acknowledgement toward the Lord first thing in the morning is already a huge step. Acknowledging that the Lord is with you, that the Lord is there. Like, this doesn't need to be like, go on the rooftop and pray for 6 hours before you get your day started. Like, this can just be a acknowledgement toward the Lord as you're making your morning coffee or anything like that. Like, or just frankly, just leave your phone behind. Like, it doesn't matter how long it takes you to wake up, just leave the phone behind and don't pick it up first.
Yeah. Start the day with the Lord, talking with the Lord, listening to the Lord, and maybe just communing. I do have to be careful on the communing part because I will fall right back asleep.
It's okay.
But that's our first thing. And the second thing, we want you to pray the Lord's Prayer 3 times a week for the remainder of the year. We originally thought every day, and we're like, nope. For some, this might be a hard practice, a difficult practice they're not doing. So 3 times a day. 3 times a day. 3 times a week.
I mean, hey, you can go 3 times a day.
You can do 3 times a day.
Points.
Just pray straight through it. We're going to include a document in our comment section. Is that where we're going to put it?
It'll be down in the description. You'll find a link to it.
description. That'll help you as you walk through this. But those are just kind of two practices of this practice. To kind of help you stay focused as you kind of don't coast through the year, but move forward.
The reason that we're offering the Lord's Prayer to you is that it's a pre-written prayer. Sometimes we don't pray because we don't know where to start with prayer. But if you look at the Psalms or you look at the life of Jesus, there are these pre-written prayers like the Lord's Prayer that just give you a place to begin. And sometimes just reading that prayer is prayer enough. But then the document that we're going to include is maybe you want to use it as a template or a starting place for a continued time of prayer. And we're just hoping that that's a blessing for you. We do want to be very, very clear. These are invitations. These are not requirements. This isn't like, hey, if you want to continue to be a member of the Palmetto family, you must pray the Lord's Prayer 3 times. We're checking. No, it's nothing like that. We make invitations. You make decisions. This is all invitation for you. So as we move forward, we're going to move from prayer, which traditionally is a more individual practice, but also in the coming year, we will be thinking about an outward practice of hospitality. We're thinking about how hospitality can be an opportunity for evangelism to share the life and lifestyle of Jesus with people. And this all began with this book by a woman named Rosaria Butterfield. We'll link it down in the description below. It's called The Gospel Comes with a House Key. And without giving away the entire story, long story short, Rosaria Butterfield came to the Lord because of a Christian family's hospitable practices. It wasn't because they invited her to church. It wasn't because they preached on a street corner or anything like that. It was purely out of their invitation for her to come over for dinner, to have conversations, to share their lives with her. And it was that opportunity, it was that experience that eventually led her to the Lord. She's now married to a minister. It's these kinds of things. You just never know what small opportunities. So she actually uses the term radically ordinary hospitality. We're not talking about craziness. We're not talking about like you have to have this massive dinner table with all people. No, it's just very simple. But we've kind of even seen this already in the life of our church. We were talking earlier about some of the baptisms that we've seen.
Yeah, our baptisms that we've seen recently, we were talking about, like you said, talking about this earlier. We've had a couple that they grew up in our church, and we love that. That Absolutely. Is awesome. But we started talking about those that have come from outside, and it's through these personal relationships that they've had with members who invited them to come to worship or Bible study, to an event, whatever it was. And through that, creating community, creating relationships. And through that came to give their life to Christ.
And it was usually just simple friendships.
Yes, very simple.
I mean, a lot of them weren't even people like that they went out to meet. It was people they already had relationship with. Sometimes when we think about hospitality, it's like, I got to go meet somebody new and bring them in. It's like, no, you already have a circle of people who you can be inviting and reaching out to and things like that. We talked earlier about how life groups really are a vehicle for hospitality. This is actually part of the reason why we have life groups. It's so that we can move our conversations to a dinner table, so that people can open up their homes and share their lives. It removes barriers, and it gives more opportunities for people to share authentic parts of themselves with other people.
And I like how you say that, because look, you and I both love Sunday morning worship. We love that time of coming together, but there's kind of that, I put on my nice, nicer clothes.
I used to dress nicer clothes.
Now it's
jeans and flannel.
It's not necessarily the suits that we grew up with wearing, but there's not a lot of seeing who I really am, seeing who the Lord has helped shape me to become. I think, what was I like in college compared to what I am now? I don't even have to go back to college. 10 years ago. And what I love is we're doing these Wednesday meals. We've been doing them since April, and I've been challenging myself to try to sit with different people that I normally don't sit with. And some of the conversations have just been so great. Just learning more about people and who they are, where they've come from, their background. And it's given me opportunity, to see their faith story, to see how God has transformed them. And that's just been so awesome. And that's kind of what we're talking about. Just these relationships, time around table, and doing this through a life group, which we get to do at ours. And it's so great.
And we're going to get into, just like we did with prayer, we're going to give you some kind of practical tips on how you can incorporate this into your life. But we really want to just push this idea of ordinary hospitality. Like, this is simple. This is doing what you already would do and then inviting other people to be a part of it.
And one of the things we talked about, I'm obviously a huge extrovert.
I am not.
Yeah. And so that's one. So for those of you that are introverts in there being like, this sounds scary. No, we're not asking you to go door knock. We're not asking you to go meet strangers. We're asking you in the areas of your life that you're already with people to just be more intentional in what you're doing. It's not, like he said, it's not this radical crazy stuff. It's radical ordinary stuff.
Super simplistic, your everyday life. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to butcher it, of course, now that I'm on camera and a microphone, but it says, the greatest gift that you can offer another person is your transforming life. Transforming, pushing this idea that you are always being changed. You're always being formed to be more like Jesus. But the idea is you are offering your life to other people, and that's the greatest gift that you can give them. It's not, you don't have to go out and create something incredibly new. It's just, you bring yourself. And that's really what hospitality comes down to. And this is what it means to be a Jesus follower. Look at the New Testament. I mean, it's people, and there's a reason that they had church in homes. This is where the locus of a life of faith begins. So we want to turn the question to you and help you to reflect a little bit in the same way that you did with prayer. Where do you currently see hospitality playing out in your own life? How do you see this becoming a part of who you are? extend it out. How is your family already being hospitable to other people, whether it's people in our church community or even those outside of it? And then if you're a part of our life group, how has your life group practiced hospitality together? I think that's really a place where you can dig in and see some of the ways that God has used those opportunities as well. So take a couple of minutes. We're going to put those questions up on the screen for you, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We're praying that these conversations really have been reflective about your own life and are giving you the space to already maybe even think of some ideas for how you're going to live out these practices of Jesus in 2024. So what we want to do is just offer you a couple of little tips. We've got a long list here, but what we'd like to do is just offer you one or two for each of us. But then we're going to include the full list of all of the practical tips that we have in the description of this video, so that you have full access to it and you can refer to them later in your conversations. So the first tip that I really just want to lay out there really is kind of holiday oriented. Okay. I want you to think of a Christmas tradition that you and your family are going to do this year. Maybe it's going to see the lights at Riverbank Zoo, or maybe you're a Saluda Shoals kind of person. You're going to go ride through the lights at Saluda Shoals, or maybe every single year you have one particular meal outside of like the Christmas meal, or you are going to watch Christmas movies, or whatever it is. Just want you to think of that one tradition that you're already going to do, and then think of one person or one family that you can invite to join you in that tradition. So you've just taken a family movie night and become a larger family movie night. Now it's not just your nuclear family, it's another family. Now you're not just driving through Saluda Shoals lights by yourself, but instead you're able to load all the kids up in the car, maybe get out and walk around. And you're just able to, look, this is just about sharing life together, because now you've got memories. Now you've got shared experiences, and it's really easy just to kind of break the ice. And then it's even simpler to say, hey, why don't you come to, we're having breakfast with Santa at our church in just a couple weeks. We'd love for you to come and be a part of that, like just so we can serve you. So these little things just kind of build on one another. So think of a Christmas tradition, invite another family to join. Do you see one in this list that you want to share?
I'm going to hit two. I'm going to hit one for our members,
Yep.
kind of more specific.
Yep.
So try this. We do church luncheons all the time. Well, not all the time, but often. We do Wednesday night meals. So what I find myself doing is I often sit with my wife and people that I'm closest to. And one of the things I've challenged myself to do is go sit with somebody different.
Yeah.
Somebody that I don't know very well, just sit down, ask some questions. I was told the other day, somebody sat with someone and was just talking with them while their family was going to get food. And they said, thank you for sitting and talking with me. I don't get talked to a lot. And I was like, wow, that's hard. And we get kind of caught in our own rhythms. And so on those Wednesday night gatherings, on our potluck luncheons or whatever, go sit with somebody else. And kind of on that, invite a family over to your house. I know this is hard. My wife and I have had this conversation. I like my house looking nice, but I'm not Pigpen from Charlie Brown, but I'm not Martha Stewart. It looks amazing.
Right.
So it doesn't bother me as much. Whereas she wants, when we were doing youth ministry, she would always clean the house before the teens came over. And I'm like, do you know what it's going to look like after we have 20 kids in our house? Like, it's just okay. It's okay. It'll be okay. So I do understand for some people this is a little bit harder because of maybe where they live or where their house. But invite a family over. Invite someone that you maybe don't know well. You'd like to get to know a little better. Maybe if that's too much, invite a family you are close with. The first time. And just have them come over. Get used to it. Again, we're not saying you have to do this. These are invitations. And maybe it's a smaller step for you. Maybe it's you go out to eat somewhere with them because that's where it's more comfortable. But reach out again, like you said, making memories, going out to lunch with family, having somebody come in.
Right.
Just a little invitation there.
Well, and it's easy. You talk about people like partnering with families that you're already in relationship with. If you are self-conscious about the cleanliness of your house because you got small kids and they're wrecking it all the time or whatever, but another family at church that you're close to who maybe their kids are out of the house and it might not be as complicated for them to wrestle with. Hey, maybe you could partner together to then reach out to another family who's new at our church and say, hey, why don't you join all of us for dinner? Then it's in a shared environment, but everybody can participate in that opportunity together. The beauty of all of this, whether it's the prayer practices or the hospitality practices or any of the rest of it, is it doesn't matter where you are on the journey of faith. It doesn't matter what life stage you have, what your income is, if you're in college or you're retired or whatever, there is an invitation for all of you. No matter whether you've got a massive house on the lake or a studio apartment, there is an opportunity for you to be hospitable and to share the life of Jesus with the people around you. And you never know what a small step will bring.
And I also, when we put this together, we think, and you just said this, we think about all ages.
Yeah.
Mom and dads, help your children to understand this, to see this. It might be a little above their head, but you can show them things that they can do at their school, at their sports teams, whatever it is. So make sure that you're not overlooking and don't let them give you it's too hard. No, because this stuff is, we created this specifically. And if you look at all these practices, from a young age, you can be teaching these things. We see it throughout Scripture. And so that's one of the things, that's why we're real excited about these two specifically. Because we think that everyone, regardless of age, like you were saying, can participate in this and can create this community.
Right. The driving point that we're trying to make right now and also in 2024 is that a life of faith in Jesus is a lifestyle. It's not just some ideas or some beliefs that you ascribe to in your mind, but instead these are everyday aspects of your life that you live into. We want to be the kinds of people that are hospitable, the kinds of people who are prayerful, the kinds of people that pursue community instead of isolation, the kinds of people that pursue holiness instead of immorality and indulgence. Like, we want our lifestyle to help shape who we are and who we are becoming. So our prayer is that in this holiday season, looking at Thanksgiving, looking at Christmas and everything else that's to come, that you find some rest in the Lord. And that you don't feel these as burdens to be placed on your back, but instead are just opportunities for you to take that next step in your faith journey wherever you are in it. And we look forward to playing a little small role, playing a role in giving you opportunities to take a step, to grow, and to become more like Jesus, both now and in the future. So we can't wait to see you. Our prayer is that this has been a blessing for you. We'll see you on Sunday, if not sooner. Grace and peace, my friends.